Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of Weekly Emsights, your weekly live where we talk about anything and everything marketing and advertising related when it comes to COVID-19 and your communication strategy. Like I said, this is week 3 of this, and we're happy to have you guys here with us again. Today, we're going to be talking about pivoting your content strategy with authenticity. And to kind of guide that conversation, I am joined by Dave Anderson, our Director of Search. How's it going, Dave?
Good. Good morning, everybody.
So, Dave, as kind of a tradition, we always pop in and say where we're broadcasting from. So where are you right now?
Well, I'm in my living room, so I changed scenery. Usually I'm in the basement. Thought I'd change scenes to have a little bit better of a background for everybody. So I'm in my living room at this point.
Nice. I told Dave we have a limit of one bald guy in a basement at a time for these things. So we reached that max with me, so he had to relocate. So So Dave, let's jump right into it. I know we've had a lot of questions about content strategy and where do we go from here from some of our previous sessions. So one thing that we hear over and over is people asking, how do we find a good balance between our normal content and coronavirus centric content? What's that good mix? What's appropriate? You know, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I definitely have heard that question quite a bit too. I think it really depends on, I mean, of course, I'm going to start with it depends on your situation. And that's not always a great answer, but it really does. There's a fine balance, I think, for me in terms of where you stick with your evergreen content and when you kind of pivot towards the more current events, how is COVID affecting things. So it really is, you need to be authentically thinking about your customers and what's impacting them the most right now, and pivoting your content to make sure that you have that balance of, yes, we still have our content calendar, we still have the things that we want to have out there as a business, but we also need to make sure that we're talking to our customers and answering or providing potential solutions for situations that have come up for them with the kind of the new normal that's constantly changing now. So that's kind of my first thought on it. So my general advice is always kind of find a blended path that works. Keep kind of moving forward with the pace of content that you have, and with your evergreen content, put it out there, but give it a spin. Make sure you're still being empathetic to the current kind of situation that everybody's in. Try to focus on how you can help with solutions, or just be helpful in general with the content you're providing, and be more focused on that than maybe you are under normal circumstances.
Awesome. Do you see people being a little more behind the scenes or candid with the kind of content that they're putting out there now than they might have typically been?
You know, I've seen, for me, I've seen some really good content strategy shifts and pivots out there. I've also seen some that haven't really pivoted at all. I think, and that kind of can come across as numb to the situation. You're just kind of continuing to push your sales messages and not really shifting the conversation to how it's helpful. And I think, but I've seen some really good stuff. So locally, I've seen really good stuff from businesses that have been significantly impacted and how they're shifting their business. And a big key of that business shift is how they're communicating to the customers and getting that message to them, knowing that everybody's, of course, COVID is top of mind for everybody, and how they can what they're doing and how they're being safe for the customers, and making sure that that's a top of mind conversation.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of businesses kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit when it comes to their content, when previously they might have been a little more buttoned up, a little more corporate, kind of transitioning some of that, especially on social. I've seen it a lot, where they're kind of, turning it into a, much more conversational, approach and mix. and just being really honest with people and saying, hey guys, here's what we're doing, here's how we're here for you, and all of that stuff. So it's a really good time for authenticity. I know we kind of hit that a lot whenever we had Natalie on the show here, but I've really enjoyed seeing kind of the humanized side of businesses, and how they're really becoming more and more customer centric lately. It's really been good to see.
Yeah, I agree.
Big picture, are there things now that you're seeing that are working, people making shifts particularly well, things that people have tried that maybe didn't hit the mark?
Yes, I think in the past I've kind of seen a little bit more hesitancy towards on webinars and online events and things of that nature. But right now, that's really kind of, I think that's probably where a lot of the pivot has happened. Is I've seen conferences that have switched over to they're doing a digital only all-day conferences that you've got everybody. This is an example. We've pivoted to do these talks every week and just try to be helpful and doing some live events, doing some webinars. Those are definitely good. I think there's for some businesses, maybe virtual events or virtual gatherings that you can plan and have kind of some interaction with your customers still without honoring the social distancing rules and that kind of thing. Also, I think just kind of the way that we present online education is something. Obviously, a lot of us are home with kids, so there's a lot. So a lot of the content that I'm getting is from online educators and how they're trying to shift and pivot and make things easier and better for us to help our children as we're kind of shifting gears into becoming a little bit part-time teacher as well. So we're kind of trying to they're trying to help us make it easier for us so we can still do our jobs and also help with that piece of our life and making the time that we're spending at home with our families and our children a little bit easier, and so that we don't completely lose the productivity at work that we need to have. So those are kind of, I think that's probably the main thing that I see is a lot of shift towards video and live streaming and things of that nature. Yeah, I think that's probably where I've seen the most shift. There's definitely been a lot of focus on email strategy as well, in terms of kind of one-to-one communications, being a little bit more focused to the individuals, and maybe spending a little bit more time on how you communicate those individual messages.
That's a good point. I saw an interesting spot whenever I was watching the NFL draft this weekend, and it was actually an AT&T spot, and they were showing just the fronts and the stoops of a bunch of different houses across the country, and it was like Corey LaGrange High School, Dave Anderson Middle, just all these different homes and apartments and townhouses that they've turned from just being places of residences, and now they're school, they're the gathering place, they're they're anything and everything now for people. And I think going into things with that mindset kind of puts you in a good place to think about the consumer from an empathetic standpoint. And like you said, there's a lot of internal business changes that are having to go on, and that's really surfacing in our communications too, which it kind of throws a wrench in things, right? Whenever we're having to reassess our entire plans that we lay out. This hit us in the middle of Q1, whenever we're really just getting our feet out, getting our feet under us, and it's left people questioning, okay, I know what the right thing as a member of this community is to do. I know the appropriate thing to do is to not hit hard on sales, not hit hard on all these things that we had planned to do at the beginning of the year. But those things are still important for us to function as a business, right? How can people kind of balance that need to maintain and manage that business and sales side of things with where we find ourselves when it comes to goal setting and, all of these kinds of things, hitting KPIs, and any recommendations for that, how we can find that balance?
Yeah, I mean that's a fairly challenging thing. I think we have to start by just readjusting what our expectations are with our goals, and maybe lead gen is still obviously critical for everything, and converting sales and that thing, all of that. But maybe it's a little bit longer of a process to get to that point. So focusing in a little bit more on the funnel, maybe your funnel is shifted, maybe your customer journey is shifted a little bit, and so you need to make sure that and it's hard to answer that in such a short period of time, and maybe it's going to start shifting again with things starting to maybe slowly opening back up. So there's going to be constant kind of changes for a while, I think, in terms of how your business model is working and what's going on. So I think maybe rather than focusing too much on that back end conversion, you focus more on how you're engaging with your customers, and are they reacting and positively to kind of what the messages you're putting out, and are you continuing to build that relationship for the long term? Because I think the long term play is really the critical piece here. Short term, there's going to be impacts for everybody. But if you can play the long game and make sure you're focused on that, I think that'll be a big key for kind of coming out of this with a positive spin and down the road.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me of the old saying, and I'm probably misquoting this. In fact, I'm sure I'm misquoting this, but it's people don't remember the things that you said, but they remember the way that you made them feel.
Yeah.
I think now is the time to be, on the forefront, there for the community, real, candid, and, in it together as a message, because, we will bounce back. We will come out of this, and we will come out on the other side. And I think people, we're already starting to recognize, some of the practices that people, used to engage in that were opportunistic, or, they were aware of how you were kind of bringing in their data and, treating them as a consumer. I think now more than ever, people are going to recognize people being, what's the word I'm looking for? Opportunistic, or, trying to take advantage of a situation, or even just, insincere. And I think, if we make those investments now on playing that long game, it's going to pay off in dividends when we do ultimately come out on the other side, right?
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I think, and that's what I just kind of started off earlier, as some people haven't shifted and they're kind of just cramming their sales message still the same way that they were before. That's kind of a lack of authenticity, and it's a lack of empathy for the situation in my mind. So it's like you've got to balance that and find a way to really communicate well, and make sure that you're showing your potential customers that that's like they're your number one concern. It's not necessarily sales right now, but we've got to obviously you still got to do business, so you got to find a way to make that happen. But just cramming that message is not going to be successful for you.
Right. So what are some ways that people can continue to be authentic, to their brand voice, while still doing, still being good stewards of the consumers? Because that's not always the corporate voice that a brand takes, right? Is first person, I, we, you kind of stuff. How can they balance that and stay authentic?
I think that's again another challenge. It's you've got to make sure you got to go back to what is your brand voice first and foremost. You got to kind of look at what is your mission, and how are you trying to be a member of the community and helping in those ways. And you shift your language, and you shift how you talk to people. So maybe where you were a little bit more business and buttoned up with your language, you kind of shift your gears, and you look at how are people actually talking about things, and what kind of language are they using, and you can modify your language to for that situation, and really just talk directly to people. And I think rather than trying to just push on what is your brand point, you push on what's the broader picture, and how are you potentially positioned to help with whatever the situation may be. for your customers, depending on your business.
For sure. And we recognize that there's a lot of nuance, right? There's, what's good for one company is not going to be, the answer for another. So for all of you guys here in attendance, if you do have specific questions, make sure you drop those in the chat, and we'll do our best to address those as we go. We've gotten some great feedback and some great comments on some of the previous stuff we've talked about. So we do want to make sure that if you have a specific question, we can address that. Another question that I've heard a few times for people who registered is centered around how can you create or adjust your content production calendar right now, because it's easy to say, let's shift the conversation, let's do X, Y, and Z, but the reality is right now, many of us are working with, displaced workforce. Our designers here, our copywriters here, our director of X, Y, and Z is here. So how can we kind of start making those shifts in a way that's expedient and efficient?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I kind of always say stay away from saying like you need to stay with this specific cadence of content production. I think it's more important to be consistent and kind of and focus on the quality of what you're putting out, rather than making sure you're hitting that 3 blog posts a week target or whatever it was that you had before all of this kind of shift happened. Just really focus on, what's the quality, what message is really gonna hit with your audience right now, and focus a little bit less on, we need to just keep cranking out content. I think content for the sake of content is never a good recommendation. And so I would, even before this, I would have said that comment, but I think it's even more important now, just to make sure we're not flooding the content, with just stuff that's not necessary. It doesn't really bring the value that you want to bring forward. So I think the other thing I'd say is it makes total sense to slow down or speed up depending on your situation. As Corey mentioned, everything's shifting with your workforce. If it's harder to meet the demands of the content calendar, shift your calendar. Don't put so much pressure on everything else. It's everybody's working through a lot of hard stuff, and so I think it really depends. But in some cases, maybe content is kind of where you want to emphasize, and you want to be focused on making sure you're pumping out consistent, ongoing content to your audiences. So maybe you speed it up in that case. But the reality is, it just needs to pivot towards what's comfortable for you, what's helpful and useful for your customers.
Yeah, I think whenever this started talking about, having, weighing the option of, do I need to send this message? Is this helpful for our community, or am I just sending this because, we feel like everybody's doing it, so we need to be doing it? At the beginning of this kind of phase that we're going through, I remember for a time, every single business that I had ever subscribed to their newsletter sent an email saying, we care about you and your safety. This is our COVID, response, and X, Y, and Z. And it kind of felt a lot like when CCPA and GDPR hit, and you got an email from every single company you had ever subscribed, and say, hey, we've updated our privacy policy. Hey, this is X, Y, and Z. So I think that's important too, is like you mentioned, making sure that the messages that you're putting out there are necessary and that they're relevant, and you're not just doing things to fill a space.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of that lately. So just making sure that you're intentional with your messaging is super important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I noted that about everybody sitting out there. Here's how we're responding to COVID, and that's great, and it's good to get that out, I suppose, but it's not always necessary. So I mean, I got those from blogs that I read. I'm like, yeah, you're probably blogging from your home anyway. I don't know that we necessarily know about your shift, but
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So, but I think, yeah, generally speaking, it's good to just balance what you need to actually communicate.
Yeah. Have you seen any good examples of people kind of using content as you know, a timely and helpful example right now?
So I saw several restaurants and breweries around here that I frequent they did shift really quickly to be a model where they could do curbside pickup and things like that. They weren't necessarily set up for that initially. So they've done a really good job of communicating in a way that is valid for me. So you know, I do curbside beer pickups weekly and go get food once in a while. It's nice to have them tell us exactly, hey, here's what you need to do in order to get your food on the curbside with us. So
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
that's a good example. I think some of the bigger brands have maybe gone a little heavy with the "we're here for you" kind of terminology and
Yeah.
content, but you know, that's kind of what they're going to do, I suppose. So I think, yeah, overall, I think really what I've seen the better shifts in is the locally focused people that are really centered on community and making sure that we're all kind of working together and to get everybody through this.
Yeah. It's been great to see, like you said, local businesses jumping in and being more present, especially, you know, on social. In my past, I've worked a lot with local businesses, and they're saying, "Hey, what should we be doing on social? What should we be doing on our website?" And it's always share your menu, share your specials, you know, act as customer support, do X, Y, and Z, meet the staff, you know, all of this stuff. And it's unfortunate that it took a pandemic for a lot of these businesses to start tapping into all of that and what's at their disposal. But I've been amazed at the kind of uptake that small and local businesses have had when it comes to technology and utilizing platforms and taking online orders and building e-commerce solutions on the fly and stuff like that. So it's it's always at the times when we feel in a pinch that we're willing to kind of make a move, because we get stuck in kind of these ruts from time to time. But I've been just so impressed and overwhelmed in just some of the quality of stuff that I've seen coming out
Yeah,
of local business, um, partnerships, partnering with each other, saying if do this thing here and we'll honor this thing here, or you know, order from both of us, or you know, we're banding together and building an e-commerce solution where you can pre-order and proxy pickup and all this stuff. It's people are starting to get really inventive with the way that they're using, you know, all these tools that we've had for such a long time, right? And just really putting them into play. That's one
yeah,
shining thing that I've seen come through that I really do hope sticks around even as we do start to emerge from this, is people just recognizing the power that they do have to have these conversations one on one with the consumer, and not everything has to be, you know, through a filter or through a, you know, playing the telephone game with people, or we can really control our own, you know, communications, and people want that. There's a desire for it. So I've been
yeah,
just so blown away by the small business community and all of that stuff. It's nice to see mom and pop shops that, you know, I feel like 5 years ago would have been, well, what even am I doing on Facebook? Do I even need to be on here? To where that's now the primary way they're delivering their offerings and their updates and things like that. It's really awesome.
yeah. I'd agree. I think that's where I've seen the biggest shifts happening, in my opinion. So I think it's really cool too.
Awesome. So Dave, do you have any final recommendations that you can give to people if they're kind of staring down this big behemoth of a content plan that they had for the year, and they recognize that they need to make a shift, but they need to take that first step? What's your recommendation for something actionable they can do today?
Um, I think I think the first step that I would take is, I mean, if you've got a full year calendar already planned out, take a look at that calendar and see what's if it's still mission critical, and see if there's you know, I think I would recommend doing some deep research into what are topics that are related to how your customers are actually out there talking about things, and shifting to maybe focus and emphasize on, at least in the short term, emphasize some of those topics rather than maybe some of your more your business driven content that you were planning to produce. I'd also another thing I'd recommend is potentially looking at previous content that you put out that you could potentially update to really address or comment toward current events. And so I think those are areas where you can make some immediate impacts and get some benefits from it.
Awesome. That's great advice. Not necessarily having to feel like you're working from scratch for everything. It's tough to work with a blank slate, right? Or a blank piece of paper is every writer's worst enemy. So
definitely. I always recommend repurpose content you've already got. Make it work for what you need to do now. So there's, you may have old content out there that is now relevant in a different way.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dave. This was helpful. I know to a lot of people. We got to cover a lot of questions that we've had from previous sessions, and I think now people can be a little more secure in knowing that they're not in this alone and have some actionable next steps that they can take for pivoting and doing it, in an authentic way.
Yep.
Awesome. So if you out there have any additional questions, or maybe you have an issue that you're facing when it comes to pivoting your content, updating your search strategy, your paid media, you're not sure where to reallocate those dollars, or any kind of marketing or advertising question that you might have, Influence, we are here to help. Like we mentioned in our previous sessions, we are offering 30-minute, what we're calling marketing therapy sessions, and you can get that scheduled by sending us an email to expert@influence.com. That's the address that you see here on your screen. Send us your questions. We'll find the most appropriate person here on our team to answer that, and you can schedule a 30-minute session with them. No strings attached, no charge. We just want to extend that offer to the community because we know that we are all in this together. And also, if you want to be notified whenever we're going live again, which this takes place every Monday, but we'll be putting out some additional support COVID content, you can sign up for our newsletter at the address here. And you can also register for next week's session, where we'll be talking about how to rebalance your email strategy during a pandemic. We'll be joined by some of our email experts, and we'll talk through some of your questions and concerns that we've already gotten, and just tell you how you can be more effective and efficient there. So that's all we have for today. Dave, thanks again for sitting down and taking a chunk out of your Monday and visiting with us and the team and giving us some good insights that we can leave with today.
Absolutely, no problem.
All right, guys. Well, until next time, we'll see you next Monday for Emsights Weekly. Have a great week.